Hi, this is Cal Harrison for Information Security Media Group. Welcome to today's session entitled Redefining the Road Ahead, Identity Security Insights and Strategic Shifts for 2025, featuring Chris Gossett, Senior Vice President of Technology Services at SailPoint, and Amit Chikra, a principal at Deloitte. Before I introduce our speakers, just a bit of background on this session. Today, Chris and Amit will share an advanced look at the findings of their 2025 Redefining Identity Security Report. This session will delve into the transformative shifts in identity security, from combating rising cyber threats to leveraging AI-driven innovations. We'll explore actionable insights, market trends, and strategic opportunities for organizations navigating the identity-first era. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about Information Security Media Group. We currently publish more than 24 international media sites, Bank Info Security and CU Info Security for financial services, Gov Info Security for the public sector, and Healthcare Info Security for the medical community, plus Info Risk Today, Data Breach Today, and Careers Info Security. Each of these sites is dedicated to providing education and news on information security. With over 1 million members registered to our websites, we have created a true information source tackling the key issues of interest to our unique audience. If you have questions for our speakers during this session, please submit them via the chat on your screen, as well as any technical issues during the webinar. In addition, I want to emphasize that the content being presented in today's webinar is copyrighted material and is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you or your institution would like to use the information presented in today's session or are looking for customized training education, please contact us. Next, a little about our sponsors. SailPoint is the leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise. Enterprise security starts and ends with all identities and their access. Yet the ability to manage and secure identities today has moved well beyond human capacity. Using a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the SailPoint Identity Security Platform delivers the right level of access to the right identities and resources at the right time, matching the scale, velocity, and environmental needs of today's cloud-oriented enterprise. Our intelligent, autonomous, and integrated solution puts identity security at the core of digital business operations, enabling even the most complex organizations across the globe to build a security foundation capable of defending against today's most pressing threats. Next, our speakers. First is Chris Gossett, Senior Vice President of Technology Services at SailPoint Technologies, where he leads SailPoint's Global Solutions Engineering Team, the SaaS Upgrade Business Unit, and SailPoint's Cloud Managed Services Team. Chris has worked in the identity software development and software delivery space for over 20 years. He has a passion for helping businesses use software to create a strategic advantage in their markets for building teams of like-minded people who are focused on customer success. Next up is Amit Chikra, a principal with Deloitte and Touche LLP, who has over 22 years of experience in the cyber risk domain, with a focus on identity and access management. His broader experience includes areas of security and controls, compliance, and cyber risk governance. He has helped large Fortune 500 organizations solve their identity and access management related challenges across the globe in areas of identity governance, access management, cloud identity, directory services, and privileged access management. Amit leads Deloitte's Marketplace Alliance with SailPoint and also leads Deloitte's identity practice within the life sciences and healthcare sectors. Welcome, Chris and Amit. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, this is a great topic, and as we can see from the headlines, the largest breaches have been due to failures in identity management. So this is a really hot topic these days. So how would you, and Amit, let's start off with you. How would you assess the state of identity security today?
Yeah, it's a good question, very relevant to the times. I think the fact that most of the breaches, and like you said, start with some kind of, I don't even call it a failure of identity security, but some kind of identity breach isn't surprising to us who are in the identity business or even cyber, broadly. We've been saying this for years, right? As things have moved to the cloud, as the enterprise has opened up, we don't have the traditional perimeter anymore. And identity as the new perimeter is no longer even a buzzword. That is a reality that we all live in, right? And we have lived in the last few years. So I think organizations have kind of recognized that and realized what the importance of identity security is. It's just a very complex thing to solve for. And the result of that is everybody, the bad actors, the hackers, everybody's going after organization crown jewels, information, financial data through that route. I think by the latest statistics, 70 to 80% of breaches are through some kind of compromised identity, right? Whether it's hacked or otherwise guessed passwords and things like that. So we've seen this evolution over the last few years, and that's why we in the identity business, Chris, myself, SailPoint, Deloitte broadly, we've been working together in solving for these challenges, working with our clients and how we can solve for this better in a more efficient manner. And we continue to kind of go down that path. In fact, we talk about a survey that we just did. The survey is going to be published recently, and the genesis of that was really this problem, right? We sit together, we talk about the future of identity, and we have a lot of hypotheses around why things are the way they are based on our experience. But we wanted to listen to the voice of our customer, really go out into the business world and understand what their challenges or what they were seeing in a more neutral manner rather than just the projects that we do. And so interesting findings, and we'll talk about it throughout the session here. But like I said, it's not surprising to us. Identity is the new perimeter, and most of the breaches coming through that. So it is a challenge that we all deal with, and we're helping our clients solve for.
Yeah, just to chime in there, I think it's really interesting, right? It feels like the bad guys are just getting smarter and smarter, right? And I think what security teams have done a good job over the last few years is really focusing on defending that perimeter and hardening that attack surface. And as that's gotten better and better, right, they're moving to the next layer, right? And I think what we're seeing is that identity is that kind of soft underbelly of many corporations where they historically haven't done a great job of managing identity at scale. And so now this is kind of it is the new firewall, but it's also kind of the new attack vector where I think many bad actors are starting to discover and starting to really lean in. And then the other side of that, to your point about the survey, it feels like many organizations are really have been focused on identity, but maybe identity in some silos, right? Access management or MFA or compliance or governance, this kind of broader, more holistic approach of identity security where we're really asking companies to look at both kind of proactively, do people have the right access at the right time? And then reactively, when things happen, how do I understand that context and use that to really lean in to make sure that people understand the impact of a breach and they can react accordingly is kind of this emerging ask, I guess, that many companies we work with, and I think it was reflected in the survey as well, are being asked to suddenly solve. And kind of it requires a bit of a different approach, a different tooling, and maybe a different focus than they've been used to before. So, I think if you look at the state of identity security, it feels like changing is probably the right term. And then also just getting more and more complex. And I think the survey certainly reflects that. And many of the conversations I think we're in on a daily basis reflect that as well.
And even the term that you use, Chris, like identity security is a newly coined term, right? We used to call it identity management, then it became about governance. And the fact that we now call it identity security is a reflection of how broad that the purview is, right? When you get identity management right, you're really talking about securing the organization, securing against risk and bad actors. So it's all reflected in how important it is now to organizations.
Yeah, and I'm sure just like me, but it feels like most organizations, right, have a pretty good idea of who has access to what for maybe like crown jewel applications, 10% or so. When you really get into that broader view of do they understand the rest of those applications? Do they understand the data and the entitlements? What's risky, what isn't? That's where it really starts getting a little iffier. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be over the next few years is for companies to really get control over that. So people really do have the right access at the right time.
And Chris, I've read an advanced copy of the survey. There are a ton of great insights in there. Could you kind of run us through what are some of the key findings that jumped out at you?
Yeah, there's so much there, right? And maybe just kind of touching on some of the things that I thought were really interesting. And we kind of leaned into some of this in the response earlier, but it's really just the growing complexity, right? These are applications now seem to be coming up every few minutes, right? And whether those are in the firewall, outside the firewall, cloud service providers, data lakes, on and on and on, right? The amount of systems and the amount of data that identity teams are being asked to understand and secure and to really make sure people have the right access at the right time to just seems to be ever growing, right? And I think that it speaks to some of the challenges that many of in the industry have. And then maybe the other side of that is helping really explain that challenge to the broader organization. One of the things that I'm always amazed at is when I'm talking to boards and CEOs that, they seem fairly confident, like, oh, maybe, we have this under control, right? We got it. We have a good handle of identity. And sometimes they're thinking about, maybe like single sign-on or multi-factor or, maybe like the edge kind of intra world, as opposed to that fine-grained identity security controls that I think many CISOs and many organizations are after. So really being able to explain what identity security really is and what the state of identity is. And honestly, Amit talked about it earlier, right? Identity is the new firewall. Well, what does that really mean? And how do you really practically make that a reality? One of the great things I think that we see is that C-level conversations are around things that are ring really true to us. Zero trust, least privilege, identity as a new firewall is great to see. But the implementation of that, I think, is really challenging. And that kind of like how to get from here to there, or the need to get from here to there, was really something that stood out to the survey to me. I mean, I don't know if you have thoughts on that as well.
No, totally. I think, we've discussed this as we've gotten the results back, right? The tone at the top is there. I think even as reflected in our answers to the first question, everybody understands the importance of identity. So the C-suite is involved. In some cases, the survey shows that even the boards are involved in making those decisions or taking a readout on how identity is going. It's as you translate that down, how broad is the buy-in across the enterprise? Is finance brought in? Is HR brought in? There it starts to dwindle. The funnel kind of starts to shrink a little bit, right? It's less and less. And then when you get down to brass tacks, how many applications have you integrated, right? Chris mentioned it's 10, 12%, right? How are you just protecting crown jewels? Are you protecting all your high risk applications? Are you also protecting all your high compliance relevant applications? And that's where the numbers really start to shrink down as the survey. What stood out to me in terms of just the numbers was the first question, or the first few questions talked about what is the level of understanding? And the answers were 70 to 80% at high to very high, right? Everybody understood it. Then we talked about how much have you implemented in terms of capabilities, right? Are you on a modern tool? Have you really started to leverage all the different capabilities around certification, application access requests, and things like that? The number dropped to about 50%. So the capabilities are there, about halfway there, right? But then the question around how much have you really integrated, right? Are you integrated across your enterprise? And have you really covered for all your critical business processes and systems? And the number dropped down to 12%, right? So you just see that, right? 80% know that it's important, but only 12% of coverage around critical factors. That in itself kind of talked about the challenges in implementing identity, right? And for us at SailPoint and Deloitte, the reason we did this survey wasn't just to understand what the market was, but really to come up with strategies and product and implementation in our go-to-market strategies in how we can help clients solve for those. So that's a very relevant factor that it's not about the education of our clients. We have to work on how to make implementation easier. How do we make the outcomes more easier to attain? And that's now our focus going forward once we've seen the survey and kind of validated some of the things we already knew and then new things that have come to light as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point about the implementation. That's the really tricky part. But what are let's first talk about what are the technical challenges that companies are facing in these implementations? Chris?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it kind of, we were talking about this a little earlier, but some of that is the history of where we've come from, right? You think about identity historically has been in these kind of silos where access management was in a different place, PAM was in a different place, IGA was in a different place. And really, part of it is kind of coming out of that legacy and leaning into maybe more modern approaches to say, you know what, at the end of the day, if I want to be able to really secure my identities, I need to have a view of who has access to what across most of the applications in the environment, if not all of them. And then I have to really understand what's risky there, what's important, where do I need to really lean into, whether that's systems, processes, pieces of data, et cetera. And so, kind of how to get from here to there. I think a lot of companies struggle with just trying to use legacy technology. Not too long ago, many of these systems were toolkit solutions, right? Where you would say, hey, I'm going to have custom processes for all of these different areas, and I'm going to customize this to the nth degree for my business. And that worked okay, right? If you've got 30, 40, 50 applications under management. But if you really think about many conversations that we're in today are, how can I manage thousands of applications at scale? How can I keep up with the pace of the business? And you just can't really do that with a toolkit or with that kind of customized first mentality. So I think really leaning into modern technology, often that's using prescriptive out of the box solutions to solve a lot of those complex problems, and really challenging the business to say, hey, do we really need this customization? Identity is such an interesting space because it is this kind of world where business processes and people meet technology. We're often trying to model both of those. So it isn't an all or nothing kind of world. There is absolutely the need to lean into to that kind of customization world where needed. But I think really going back and challenging the business and saying, is this really absolutely required, or is this something we can get away with less customization, is one of those ways to take programs from good to great. And then the last bit really is, how do I find the risky access? I often think about my son who loves Legos coming into me and saying, hey, Dad, I need this one piece, to finish this set, and going into his room and seeing literally 10,000 Legos on the floor and thinking, oh, right, this is an afternoon project now to find this one bit. And that's somewhat akin to what identity teams are trying to do, right? They're trying to find the riskiest access and to understand how people are using that access and to put those controls in place. And honestly, I think in 2025, the only way to do that is to lean into AI and ML to really have the system try to aid in that and really to be a force multiplier. Again, trying to do that manually or trying to define policies for every single bit and really be proactive, I think is just a big challenge for those identity teams to chase. So, at the end of the day, I think taking a slightly more modern approach to the way programs are run and really leaning into modern tools allows companies to really unlock the real value of identity security.
Yeah, and it's not an easy problem to solve. I mean, we've been in this business 20 plus years where it's been a formal stream, and I think we've realized the complexity of the technical landscape you're trying to manage through identity is exponentially changing and becoming more complex, right? Like Chris said, you started off in days where you had 100 applications or maybe 500 applications. Now there are 5,000, 10,000 applications in an environment. Compound that with machine identities, third parties that are getting more complex. It's a very technically complex landscape to solve for. And legacy is not going away, right? I remember 2010, I was doing a project and we had a mainframe connector to build, and somebody said, why are we building this? This will go away in the next 4 or 5 years. And here we are 15 years later, we're still building mainframe RACF connectors, DB2, OS2 is still a thing. So the old is not going away. And then the new has come in, clouds come in. I go back to the survey, 97% of the respondents said they are in a hybrid or multi-cloud environment. So not only do you have now on-prem applications and things to manage that are relatively within your control, you have this third party to deal with, right? There's a cloud platform, there's a cloud service provider or an application provider that you're trying to integrate with and then keep up with the pace of change, because that evolution where, in the past you had maybe 1 or 2 changes in a year, now you have hundreds of changes on the application side as well. So how do you really keep up with that? And I completely agree with what Chris said. You got to modernize your tech stack. You got to modernize your way of thinking, You cannot solve for every problem the way you used to, where, okay, well, I'll just build a custom process. I'll just build a custom connector. You got to start to standardize. You got to bring the business with you and not just look at it as a technical problem to solve, but rather an opportunity to change and simplify the way you're doing things. Because not only would it make life easier now, your cost of operations goes down, the cost of modernization goes down. It just makes the future much easier for you as well. So I think that's been our advice to our clients, and even more so now that we've seen the data, that just don't throw money and bodies at solving for everything within your environment. Try to see if there's a better way to do this. Is there a modern, more evolved way to look at this? Can we standardize? Can we bring things under the fold and have more standard design patterns?
So for organizations that are considering modernizing identity security, what's your advice to them, Amit?
Well, that one's easy. We can have SailPoint as the product and Deloitte as the service provider, and things good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, but I think jokes aside, before we even get to technology and implementation and what that needs to be, organizations need to sit back and really think about what is their strategy. What are they really trying to solve for? Because I think in the first few evolutions of identity and access management, it's been an opportunity missed by certain organizations in really thinking about what does identity and access management or identity security mean to them, right? They've gone at it with, oh, I'll choose the best tool that I think is the best. I'll do an evaluation. I'll choose the cheapest, or in some cases, the best, whatever that might be, the service provider, and then I'll go at it. But they haven't really thought about what are you going after? Are you trying to protect your crown jewels? Are you trying to make it an operational efficiency play? Are you trying to solve for specific business problems? And till you have that strategy and roadmap in place, till you've really understood what the business is, what the business needs, you're always going to be chasing after your tail, right? You're always going to have new things to solve for, and you really won't have a cohesive strategy and a sense of accomplishment of achieving those goals, which you can build upon. So the first step really is to really sit back and think about what are we going after? What are we solving for? What does identity security mean for the organization, right? Now, in 5 years, in 10 years, and then create a roadmap that gets you there. And then you get to the technology stack, right? Chris mentioned modernization, standardization. I mean, SailPoint's got ISC from the cloud. It's an opportunity where you could have a tool that's always going to be current. You're not stuck in the old world of having to do patches and upgrades. So you choose a tool that's modern, has these modern AI and other capabilities. And then as you think about implementation of that roadmap, organizations should really think about it as an opportunity to partner with someone rather than just finding the cheapest hands-on keyboard to implement whatever they think is the right thing to do. Because organizations like ourselves, we've got 20 plus years of experience, right? We know what's happened before, what has worked, what's not worked. We know what the future is bringing to us, how to get there. So the most successful identity programs, in my view, have been those where there's been a collaboration. It's a tri-party collaboration, right? SailPoint, Deloitte, and the client sitting together and saying, let's chart out the path to the future. Here's where I want to go. How can you help solve for this? And there's so many innovative ways that we can bring in that conversation if it's early on, versus getting an RFP blind and just reacting to something that the client has asked for, because then that doesn't give us the opportunity to give that feedback and say, hey, maybe let's do X before Y. Let's do this before that and get a better ROI or better experience for your users. So that would be really the recommendation to clients is have that strategy, make the right technology choice, and then partner through the journey rather than just treating it as a technical implementation exercise.
To add on to that, one of the things I like to talk about is identity projects are great in that, there are very few things you can do in IT to really increase your security posture, decrease risk, make their user experience so much better, solve compliance problems, make the IT team more efficient. There are all these great things that you can solve for inside the same project. But it's almost a blessing and a curse in that, with all of that comes a lot of choice. And it is like, well, what is the most important thing? What is the right order? We hear that a lot from customers in the industry that are saying, where do I start? And I think we've got a good idea of how to get going, but that idea of what to do next and what to do after that really is about, return on investment and what's really resonating with the business and where areas of pain are in maturity. So that idea of really not just taking kind of an out of the box cookie cutter approach, but leaning into what's differentiating for the business and where identity is going to have a big impact is so critical. And I think that really separates, probably good identity programs from great programs. And it doesn't take a whole lot, I think, of just insight and introspection. It's a little bit of just pausing for a bit, assessing what's important for the business and charting that course forward to really set identity programs on a really nice 3 to 5 year journey. And then the other thing I think that really resonated from your comment there to me was there are some really good basics that are applicable across the board, no matter what. One of the nice things, we've been chasing this concept of least privilege for literally probably 20 years in the identity industry. And suddenly now we have the right tools, we have the right focus and the right prioritization to really put some of those foundational principles there. And the great thing about that, right, if I get the model right, and if we really can say who should have access to what at any point in their journey, whether that's employees or contractors or vendors or machine identities or whatever, all of a sudden now you lay that strong foundation. Now you can really start leaning into maybe the first phase is compliance for SOX applications, and the next one's going to be about provisioning, and then we'll start managing machine identity. But I'm building it on that kind of strong foundation that I've laid going forward. And I think that's really one of the great things about these silos going away in the identity industry is when you start tackling that next project or that next phase in what you're trying to do, it's not like you have to start over, right? You can really lean into the investment that you've made. And I think that's why we see many companies and the velocity of in their programs picking up and having so much success is, it's not the traditional come back to me in 18 months from now, and then I'll be ready to add the next thing on my roadmap. If you really are proactive and I think leaning into advice of what we've all seen in the industry, companies can say, we can make these phases much shorter, right? We see companies getting success in 30 days, 60 days, 90-day sprints where they're rapidly going through these projects down these different phases and adding value along the way. And I think that's where businesses really start getting excited. It's not this kind of nebulous future of identity. It's like, no, we can make an impact in a very short time frame and then incrementally drive value down that path.
And it's key in the way you said it, Chris, is it's a program. It's not a project, right? It's not, I'm going to do 20 applications and I'm done. I think the key advice to clients is really to think about it as a journey. It's never going to be done because your landscape's going to change, your application's going to change. So the care and feeding of that platform is very important. And then comes all the technology that's going to evolve. AI is going to get better. There'll be better onboarding tools and better things that SailPoint will enable natively in your platform. You got to be able to take advantage of those things. So that continuity in that journey is very important, rather than saying, okay, it's a 2-year program and then I'm not going to spend anything, or that'll be the end of where I want to be. That's just never going to happen.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Is identity is one of those areas of cybersecurity that affects IT, the business, really, the core of what's going on. So can you share how is SailPoint and Deloitte working together to solve these challenges for organizations out there? Chris, you want to start?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. Yeah. Look, I think one of the most exciting things about where we are in the identity security market is that there is all this change that we've talked about today, right? And the best part about that is, identity is becoming even more and more important. And I think many identity teams are taking a fresh look at the way things should work or the right way to solve some problems. We're trying to work across the board with Deloitte in many different ways, but I'll highlight one that I'm particularly excited about. I just gave a speech with our friends at Deloitte at our Navigate conference that was just a couple of weeks ago around kind of a fresh approach to look at compliance and certifications. If you think about the natural consequence of what we've talked about, as the number of applications grows, as the number of entitlements grows, and that problem gets bigger and bigger, well, that user experience and the effectiveness of certifications doesn't necessarily grow with it, or maybe it grows in a negative way. It just gets more and more complex. And I think what we've heard in the broader market from many companies, and certainly from the people doing certifications, think like the managers, is, wow, you're asking me to certify maybe 10,000 entitlements. I don't know what these things are. This is becoming a really, really big task for me to do, and I need more help. And one of the things we've worked with Deloitte on is how can we improve that? How do we take kind of the best and breed tools from SailPoint Identity Security Cloud, Deloitte's insights in both implementation and audit, and really look at a much more modern and effective way to do certifications. So we've got some really exciting joint development on happening, and some really good best practices here to be able to say, you know what, can we take common access and set that aside? Can we lean into this concept of least privilege? Can we take access that's already being approved? Can we really use the understanding, again, of what's risky and what isn't, and really use that as a way to call managers' attentions to say, these are the things you should certify, with maybe some good technology, again, to have the right descriptions and the right insights into, does everybody else have access to this? Is this really access that's appropriate to role, or maybe the system's saying not to do this, to really kind of turn that cert experience on its head. And again, turn it from maybe sometimes a box checking exercise, if you have that many items, into something that really is where it should be, which is a security exercise. To go to these certifiers and say, these are the 10 things that matter. Here's exactly what they are. Should your employee really have this access? And to me, that's just so exciting, right? It's certifications have been in the industry for 10 or 15 years now, way back from 2008, Sarbanes-Oxley kind of timeframes. And, I think we've heard a lot of, man, it's kind of not my favorite thing to do as a manager, and turning that into something that's now much, much more impactful. And it still solves the audit problems, but then also really leans into the security world. To me, that's just such a great example of when we take, kind of our product expertise and Deloitte's implementation and audit expertise, and bring that together to really solve these problems. And like I said, there's a number of other things we have in the fire on that, but I thought that's just such a great example of, kind of best of breed from both companies really leaning in to make a big impact for our customers.
I think we're trying to solve for one of the biggest challenges, like you said, Chris. And I was at that session in Navigate, and it was beyond standing room only. People couldn't even get in. There was so much interest in the topic of going certification less and reducing the burden on the business. Obviously there's a big appetite, and we're excited about that being one of the key things we're working on. But to your broader question as well, Cal, I think when we looked at the survey and we looked at the different challenges that organizations are having around budget, around resourcing, technical complexity, and whatnot, I think we worked on kind of 3 pillars of our joint strategy and how we can enable businesses and help take them to the future of identity. And it's modernize, scale, and innovate, right? Modernization really speaks about a lot of clients, about 50% still being on legacy technology. Technology, like Chris said, is built for a different world, for a different kind of problem set that was being solved for. And so how do we really help clients come to a more modern solution in a more fast and efficient manner, right? What we've heard from our clients, the biggest challenge with modernization is that budget outlay, because they're already spending on legacy. Now they've got to spend on a new technology. And so there's a big hump at the beginning of that modernization. And then they start to see the ROI, and there's an ROI in the long term. And so we're working together on financial models and incentives where we can lower that hump for our clients, right? Through joint investments from both Deloitte and SailPoint. How can we maybe straight line that spend so they're not seeing a big uplift at the beginning and then getting the ROI later? How can we keep that hand in hand? So they still get the ROI, but they don't have that big spend up front, right? So there's a lot that we're doing in terms of modernization, also making faster time to value. So what tools can we build to bring folks from older technology to modern tools like Identity Security Cloud in a more efficient manner and in a more automated manner? So that's kind of the first pillar we're working on, is modernization. The second one is about scaling, right? Both Chris and I talked about the lack of integration and scale within the business. So you've got application provisioning, you've got workflows, but you're only doing it for 12% of your key business processes. That's not really getting value or ROI from your investments. So how do you really start to expand that? The challenge is every application is X dollars, and those X's add up, right? It becomes a factorial. It's a multiplier that really adds up. And so how can we lower the cost and time that it takes to onboard new applications, whether it's through the use of AI, whether it's through the use of other portals and accelerators that we're working on. But we want our clients to have the ability to not think about 1,000, 2,000 applications as a daunting number, but something that can be achieved in a couple of years, right? With the right stakeholder buy-in, with the right partnership with Deloitte and SailPoint. So that's the scaling problem. And then thirdly, it's the innovation, right? Chris talked about one of our leading initiatives within that. It's going certless, right? So there's a lot of complex problems we can help solve for our clients through innovation, through AI, which is being introduced and rapidly evolving. But then even things that have been done in a certain way, is there a new way to rethink them, reimagine identity security and do it in a better way? And so that's all within the innovate pillar for us. And that's kind of the three-pronged strategy we have in helping our clients. It's modernize, scale, and then innovate.
Well, we've been hearing a lot about AI and cybersecurity these days. We've already touched on it a couple of times in this webinar. How are you incorporating AI into your solutions? Amit, you want to lead off with that?
Sure. And again, I'll switch back to the survey for a second. When we talked about AI, right? It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. I think what we forget to realize sometimes, because it's been around and it's so pervasive, it's only been around for a couple of years, right? Generative AI conversation is only 2 years old. We didn't have it. We weren't talking about generative AI 2 years ago. And so it's come in and it's starting to impact everything. And when we looked at the survey results, about 80% of the respondent had a very high interest or were already on the journey towards using AI in the identity space. And there are a number of different capabilities, right? And I'm sure Chris can talk about some of the identity security cloud capabilities natively with AI, right? You can do access modeling, RBAC, all those different things, which is already a big win, and there's a big interest in the market, and we're working with a number of clients and starting to leverage identity security cloud and enabling these AI features within their organization and reaping the benefits. But again, I think it is still at its nascency. If we look forward 5 to 10 years, and that's where SailPoint and Deloitte are starting to look at, we're just creating the first building blocks of AI. Where it will be in 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a completely different world, right? AI is going to really fundamentally change the way identity security and security broadly is done, right? You can imagine a world where a person joins, an AI engine knows where, what they do, gives them all the right access, but then also integrates all the different activities they do with that access, the things they access, where they access from, feeds that into a central engine. You've got integration with your SIM and other tools. There's an end-to-end security, and the moment it detects an anomaly or a pattern, it can shut that access down or raise a flag. And all of that without the intervention of a human. So you don't have 20 people sitting somewhere monitoring all of that 24/7 and reacting to it, but AI is doing that for you and being more effective at it. So it's going to evolve. I think the cost of, cost being one of the major factors why some of these programs stall, that's going to go down, right? The per unit cost of getting new identities, application onboarding, things are going to drop. And some organizations are going to use that saving to say, we can do the same thing for less. And some are going to say, hey, there is such a great ROI on my dollar now. I need to spend more and create even more value for my organization. So excited about this opportunity that AI presents. Again, like I said, Identity Security Cloud and SailPoint, it's at the forefront of leveraging AI and enabling those features for our clients, and we're working on it and excited for the future. And I don't know, Chris, your thoughts on where do you see AI and where that goes?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The survey did say, like, I think 75% of people said they were likely or more than likely to adopt that. I was kind of surprised that wasn't 100 based on all of the conversations that we're in all day long, every day. It is absolutely, a hot topic. And, I think the great news for identity is a big data problem. And it's one that really lends itself nicely to AI solutions, whether those are traditional AI or generative AI or agentic AI. As you would imagine, we are leaning into that in many, many different ways. There's a couple pillars I'd call. One of those is just time to value. The great thing about onboarding more applications at scale and managing more identity types is that there's plenty of work for our customers to do. The challenge is, right, we have to make that a more efficient process. And so there's a couple of really exciting technologies we have there around using AI to speed the process of application onboarding, some really cool technology around how to use generative AI to find the right entitlement descriptions that are super exciting and honestly kind of mind-blowing how good that technology is. all the way to correlation, identifying machine identities and separating contractors from employees, on and on and on. We're doing a lot of work there to just try to reduce that time to value and make identity programs and identity security cloud deployments much, much easier. And then the second bit of that is, when systems are live, and we already talked about it earlier, but really being able to understand what's risky, what isn't, to be able to separate important access from others. If you think about it, we're really on the march towards the system saying, hey, this is really what a person should have access to, and putting that in place. We're doing that today with outlier access, with least privilege and role modeling, and we're on that path. But it's not too hard to imagine in the not too distant future being able to just say, the system really should manage all of that. So really leaning into that kind of prescriptive identity path of managing access and controlling risk there. The other really fun thing, and I won't dive too far into this too much, but we just did this announcement again at our Navigate conference, where we announced the SailPoint Identity Graph. And so using AI graph technology to not only do all of that in the kind of normal realm that we work in the identity world, but being able to ingest other data, so custom data, whether from other systems like graph systems like CrowdStrike maybe, or ERP systems, or really any kind of other data in the enterprise, linking that together with that identity data to really get insights that frankly are impossible without that technology, to really understand not just the access that people have today, but really how they're using it, should they be using it, and really being able to surface that kind of real-time view of identity that again is probably on the forefront of the way most companies are using identity security systems today. So super excited about a lot of those advancements and that functionality. And then the last thing I'll call out is, AI also brings all these new challenges for all of us to solve. One of the great things about customers leaning into AI agents and bots is productivity is going through the roof, but the data that they're accessing, is that now compliant? Is that going to pass audit? Can we put controls around that? Can we really understand who has access to these bots, how they're being used? Those are some of the new things that we're really trying to solve with our platform, and that our most advanced customers are coming to us and saying, hey, I got to get in front of this before, I blink and I have, 100,000 AI bots out there and no control and no idea around that. So absolutely a hot topic, and, one I think that's really making a real impact on customers' deployments today. And certainly something that we're trying to make sure we're staying one step ahead of the way of that problem in the future, so we can help customers deploy AI at scale in their environments.
Well, this is great. Just before we conclude, and we'll see if I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. But first off, could you just for our attendees out there, could you let them know who want to learn more about modernizing identity, how can they learn more?
I think we've created a joint resource, and this was one of the things we spoke about. Is it's great, we're thinking about all of these, but the dissemination of that information is when clients talk to us or we go talk to a client. So we made some of these resources available on the internet, and I think the link will be shared here with the participants. Also the survey result itself. So for folks who are interested in learning about what information is contained in the survey, what are some of the insights, the survey, but then also the thinking that it has informed, right? The strategies that I spoke about, modernize, scale, innovate, all of that's available there. There's also information on contacts within our organizations and who people can reach out to if they want to have further conversations. So that information will be made available, and I encourage everyone to kind of look at that and really kind of understand better. We've spoken about it in some terms, right? We've generalized certain things, but when you look at the data, I'm sure people will get new insights and things that will be clearer to them through that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as I indicated, we've had a couple of questions come in through the chat. As a reminder to folks in the audience, if we can't get to your question today, please send your chat in, and we'll try and get our experts to follow up with you as soon as possible afterwards. So the first question is, what are some of the levers that we can use to accelerate the time to value on identity investments? Who wants to take that?
And why don't you start and I'll chime in.
Okay, yeah, sure. And it's a age-old problem with identity, right? Because there's a big budget to it, there's a big spend, and our stakeholders, the chief information security officer or the lead on identity says, hey, I can't wait 3 years to show value, right? That's not the time frame for the millions that I'm spending on this. So there's always the opportunity and the need to break things down into smaller chunks, right? To think about phases to your program. Yes, you want to get there, that's your North Star, and we're going to get you there in the period that's defined. But what can be done first that starts to create value in the organization right away, right? Let's give users a better user experience through a better tool, right? Let's start off that, and everything can be manual on the back end, but at least they have a better user experience. Or let's start to manage Active Directory access and automate that, group management, service. There's so much opportunity. I mean, Chris, you spoke about this earlier. You touch upon every application, business process, and user in the system. So really think through what are your key pain points and what can you solve for to show value to the organization that creates that win for you, but then also gets other stakeholders bought in. And there's a big challenge with identity in saying people are like, oh, I'm busy, don't come and bother me, right? I don't have time to spend with you. But once you have those wins through those, your phase one got your big win, you can use that to socialize that throughout the organization and get others onboarded with you as well and saying, oh, I want that now. I see that. I see the value. That group had thousands of hours cut down in admin and overhead and manual work. I want that for my applications. And that's one of the most successful strategies, and not just creating time to value for your investment, but then also getting your program accelerated because now everybody wants a piece of that. Yes, I want to be part of that journey. I can spend a few hours with you a week if the result's going to be that I'm going to save thousands of hours on the back end of it. So
yeah, and that really is the great part, I think, about, kind of the more modern approach to identity security, right? It isn't like the past where, oh yeah, you had to wait a year to get that quick win, right?
Right.
I think we see lots of customers coming out, like I said, in the first 90 days with a win, and then, iteratively after that, monthly releases or bi-monthly releases of like new functionality. And I think to your point, evangelizing that and keeping up that momentum is so key. The other thing to me is always important is, we talked about it earlier, right? Onboarding applications, right? And as basic as that sounds, right? It just feels like there's so many of those, and businesses just seem to love to change all the time, right? And there's more coming. And so creating that kind of factory approach of like, what are those high impact ones at the beginning, but how can we just kind of say, hey, make this more of a repeatable process. Go to the business, grab those at 100 at a time, 50 at a time, talk through the application owners, really try to understand who has access to what, and then, figure out how deep do you need to go, right? Is read only enough? I just want visibility, or I want to do compliance or provisioning or machine identity management. Really it's a matter of degrees at that point. And I think that kind of incremental and stepwise approach keeps up that momentum. The last thing I'd say on that is, at the beginning is always when the momentum is the highest, right? And so I think you can keep that flywheel spinning fast and really institutionalize the idea of identity into those application owners' minds. I think the easier it gets long term.
Good advice. It looks like we have time for one more question. What strategies have you seen succeed in achieving organizational alignment for identity security initiatives?
Maybe I'll start on this one, and then you can finish us off there. I think, one of the great things we've seen, right, is really identifying those stakeholders early, right? And that's often security, HR, IT, often having an executive sponsor is helpful as well, almost bringing a steering committee together that meets on a regular basis to really drive home the importance of that and help drive some change into the business. It's not like identity programs have to disrupt the way things work on a day-to-day basis, but we do need the participation of application owners, of the business when it comes to entitlement descriptions, and as we're starting to lean into least privilege and role models, and really having a group that kind of champions that and really drives home the importance. And again, back to the previous comment of being able to institutionalize the idea that identity security is important. Identity is the new firewall. So how can we make sure that we're working as kind of a combined group to build up that momentum and really start deploying that at scale? I think really can, again, kind of separate good deployments from great deployments.
Yeah. And I think the understanding, as we established through the dialogue here, is the understanding is broad and everybody understands the importance of identity security. It's that they also have day jobs. I think we as identity professionals and as security professionals need to recognize that and take that into consideration into our approach of how we affect that change within the organization, right? I was sitting down with a client recently, and she was sharing her frustration with the business not really being bought into identity. And I asked her what happened, and she said, look, in January, we tried to do privileged access management, and such group didn't allow us time. And then we started to onboard applications in June, and then again, the same group didn't come with us. And then it was single sign-on in December, and it was the same problem. And I looked at her and said, you see the problem here. The problem isn't the business. The problem is you went to them at 3 different times for 3 different asks, right? So from a business perspective, it's like you're always asking me for something, right? I think we would do well to say, okay, we're going to do these 3 things in the year or whatever that might be. Let's try to do it in one go. Let's try to minimize the impact for the business and create a plan that really works for them. And that's going to go a long way in them saying, okay, I can give you this time. Maybe I can't give it to you in March, but I can give it to you in August. So let's reshape the project plan and do it then. But they'll be more receptive to a single change window versus a change every month for some other security tool, right? And in the previous question, we also talked about like building on those wins and showcasing that and making sure the organization and the different business units understand the value that you're generating through that, right? And Chris mentioned earlier, identity is one of those things that has a positive ROI, not just in dollars, but in terms of hours reduced and making things more efficient. So that's a big selling point in successful IAM programs in saying, look, if I can automate your applications and do provisioning automatically, that's not just a security and a risk win, that's actually an efficiency win. You can save cost and time in your group because your folks don't have to do all of this manually. You can reduce the number of certifications, you can reduce the amount of hours spent changing access. So I think it's really telling that story, building on those wins, but then being cognizant that we are security professionals, this is our job. Business has a different job. We just got to work with them on their schedule and make it less impactful on them when we do it.
Chris, Amit, thank you. This has been really insightful. I also want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of your day to attend this session on the state of identity security. We hope to see you again at one of our upcoming events. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Cal Harrison.